Hiya! Today I'm here to talk to you about Octave pedals and Octave plugins to use as a fake bass in your loops. So not as an extra effect, but specifically as a fake bass. So the way I'm going to use the effect is going to be 100% wet. The signal is going to completely transpose an octave down. So one thing that we're looking for is the least latency as possible. With a pitch effect, there's always going to be a little bit of latency, but we'll see which ones have an acceptable latency and which ones have too much latency. As always, if you like this kind of videos, remember to like and subscribe. And now let's talk about fake bass a little more. Okay, before we even get started with effects and plugins, I just want to show you a couple of things that can improve your bass sound for free. All my effects on the bass loop are off, so let's see the difference between playing it with my thumb or with my pick. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now let's do it with my thumb. 1, 2, 3, 4. The transients are much nicer and it sounds much more like a bass. It's not a bass, but it's way closer than it was before. So another thing we can do is close the tone knob or turn down the high frequency if you have a different kind of guitar, and that will bring us even closer. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So with a lot of high frequency now. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now again with that. With only the octave pedal on and these two tricks, the sound is much nicer, and this will make your loop track way more credible. In the last year or two, I've been looking for the best way to get my fake bass for my looping purposes. I've found a few plugins that I like, tried way more, but they didn't do what I wanted. So let's have a look at how they sound like. So let's start the loop. So this is the pedals. So the C4 synth is unexpectedly probably the fastest one of the pedals. You can hear it, it's still perfectly in sync, it's not noticeable. While the sub and up add quite a bit of latency. If you use that one, it's always nice to have the original signal mixed in, because then you don't notice the latency that much. And also I prefer the classic position rather than the poly one, because it sounds a bit, the notes are a bit more defined. And also the subbing up without the original signal, it sounds quite a lot quieter. So let's try the drop pedal. The drop pedal is quite tight, there's not much latency there, but it has a lot of that high end that I don't like very much if I want to use it as a fake bass. See, sounds, unless you want something like very funky. Now let's try the plugins. Qual Effect is not a bad plugin, it's quite nice to use. The only thing about it is that it has little latency, and it sometimes when you're doing faster lines tends to flub out a little, like it does some weird noises. So after a bit I stopped using it. And also, if you can hear it, it adds some extra compression even if I don't have any compression on it, that brings out like a little bit of noise. So it's nice. It's a very cheap plugin, and it comes with a series of other effects, but for the purposes of a fake bass, maybe not the best. Let's turn that off. So Tone Stack Pro is quite nice. It's nice because you can even add like a proper bass amp after the octave effect. The only thing about it that needs to be filtered quite a bit. Let me isolate that. There's a lot of noise in the up frequency, so you need to EQ it out a little bit. Q-Vox is not necessarily an octave effect, but it has a really nice octave and it's quite fast. The only thing about Q-Vox is that sometimes on certain notes it can flub out a little bit. It has some weird effects, so you need to be careful with it. One thing that I want to add is that all octave pedals and effects, they do struggle the faster the bass line is. Like the faster the notes, the more artifacts and more strange flabs will happen. What I'm using now is the octave pedal in the HX Stomp. I prefer the simple pitch. The simple pitch is the one that works better as a fake bass. So what I can do now is basically have my green loop, and when it starts recording it turns on the octave in the HX Stomp and it turns it off when it stops recording. That's the result. And then on top of that I have a transient shaper that really makes a difference. I have some compression, and I have a bass amp emulation that gives it quite a nice warmth to it. And the other really interesting plugin that I found is this Knorr, or Knorr because it's Swedish, so it might be Knorr, that kind of like tunes in the frequencies so they poke out in your mix. Like it doesn't add any bass frequencies or anything, it just EQs the signal so it sticks out in the mix. It's really nice. You can hear how more focused it is when I turn it on. So for me, the clear winner when it comes to pedals is this one. The C4 Synth has a very low latency, it's very tweakable, you can EQ the sound, and the sound is very pleasing. The second one for fake bass would be this, the drop pedal. It's also really handy if you can only bring one guitar to a gig, and then you can just transpose by a semitone or two. The sound is a bit bright, but if you have an EQ pedal you can fix it. This one's probably the last, although it has a lot of cool sounds that I really like to use, although it's the cheapest one, so it's quite a good one to start. So remember to blend in some of your dry signal. When it comes to plugins, I did find that they are a bit slower than the pedals, So if you want a very fast response, probably the pedals are still the best option. Amongst the plugins, I do prefer the sound of Tone Stack with the Octave pedal and the bass amp. It's quite fast and it sounds quite nice. Qvox is nice and fast, but it's also a stereo plugin. So if you want your bass to be nice and in the middle, you will need another plugin after to sort out that. QualFX is a really good tool. Not my favorite in turning your guitar into a bass, but it contains a lot of effects. So if you want to buy that one and use it for your bass loops and a lot of other stuff, I would do it. My choice now is to use a simple pitch in the HX Stomp that allows me to control it via MIDI using Loopy Pro, and it makes it really handy and for a very easy workflow. As always, if you like this kind of videos, remember to like and subscribe, and see you for the next one. Bye!